Hi, I'm William Stewart, co-founder of Teleos. Welcome back to our video series on Bible study methods. This is a very important series telling us how to interpret Scripture. And this is for every Christian an important step that they be able to study Scripture and have a high degree of confidence to interpret it correctly so we can know God and change our lives consistent with who He is. This is a general method, as we've discussed, that can be used by yourself to modify according to your style of study. There have been two previous videos on observation and interpretation. If you've not seen these, I encourage you to view these first before viewing this third and last important step, which is application. Now, application is important because we want to be able to apply Scripture to our lives so we can be obedient to His Word to satisfy God, and because He wants us to be obedient, but also change our lives and see the fruit of Scripture. So, how then do we apply? Well, first off, you have to do correct interpretation. So, that's step 1 and 2. But once you have the interpretation, then you can make a specific principle to your life, which might differ than mine. And because we're each in different spots or places in our Christian walk. So, for example, in Ephesians 5 or 4:29, where it says to not let any silly talk come out of your mouth, but what is good for the need of the person to whom you're speaking. I paraphrase that, sorry. But it tells us that we need to speak to one another with their need in mind. Now, I don't know about you, but I have missteps in my speech all the time. So, for example, you may think that you are become easily angered, and thus you become enraged to satisfy yourself in your speech. Well, a direct application, which again, application should be specific to yourself, would be to work at not becoming angry, but responding in a mild and positive way to really understand what the other person over which they are speaking and how then you could help them and serve them. My application, how I speak, might be something different. I don't often get angry, but I do make other mistakes, so it'll differ from me. So generally, almost all the commands, admonishments, exhortations in the apostolic letters are clear, they're transcultural, they're easy to apply if you think about it, and then they're repeated over and over again. How can we misapply? Well, it's easy to make mistakes. Sometimes we don't apply. We may have the wrong interpretation and misapply. Often I see people taking uh, uh, admonishments or information from other verses and apply it to the verses that we're studying. So you have to let the verse teach the verse, or they apply something for which they're already doing. So to really have an effective change in your life with Scripture, you have to change something that needs to be changed. Now, one other topic that's important, there are several verses which are difficult to apply. And these are pretty unusual, actually, in the epistles, but there are a few. They're generally recognized, and sometimes they're awkward, and people outside of Christianity will make fun of them or scoff at them because they seem quite unusual. So if you run across a command eh, that seems awkward, and I think you'll find that they're generally not repeated or repeated perhaps just one at a time, that's when it's important to look at the cultural and historical context in which they are made. So, what does that mean? Well, it means to go back into that time period in which the command was made and ask what did it mean to them within that context. And then when you have that meaning, you can transfer it to our current culture and what a good application would be for us based on that meaning. So, for example, we're told in Colossians and Ephesians in chapters 5 of Ephesians and 3 of Colossians to speak to each other in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. So does that mean that we go around singing to each other? Well, I don't know about you. If I went around singing to my dear colleagues and my wonderful wife, they would probably just ask me to stop because my singing voice just isn't really that good. So what exactly does that mean? Well, at the time that these books were written, in around 60 AD, there were a few letters from Paul that were circulating the church and probably the book of James, but we did not yet have a complete canon of the New Testament. Therefore, Christians relied on Old Testament psalms, songs, catechisms, anything that they could do to memorize scripture. So I think that the meaning to them was, since they didn't exactly have a Bible as we would know it, to use the scripture memorization techniques that they, from the word that they had received from Paul and probably the other apostles as well at this time, to speak to each other scripture. So the meaning for that time for these verses was to speak to each other scripture. Now that's transferable concept to us, to speak to each other in scripture. And that's what we should be doing. That doesn't mean we do it all the time, but it's in scripture indicates that we should do it on a persistent, frequent basis. To be careful that we're talking scripture to other people. So then you could think, okay, how could I do that to improve it? You could choose one person, a dear friend, a spouse, to whom you could improve how often you talk about passages or a verse with them and ask them about it or tell them what you've learned. Okay, so basically we've learned that application should be specific to yourself and how you can change your life to be obedient. You don't want to misapply. And where there's difficult passages, you need to consider carefully the historical and cultural context, its meaning for that time to those people. Transfer the meaning so you can apply correctly for your current culture. Okay, well, it's been a delight to me to bring you these Bible study videos. If you have questions, you can ask through the website. We'll be happy to try to answer. Please look at our other videos, particularly on theology and the verse-by-verse studies. I think that you'll get a lot out of them in terms of learning Scripture and understanding God. Thanks so much.